Good evening. We call this meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. on November 28th, 2022, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland's Police Accountability Subcommittee on Access to Information. If the Spanish language interpreters, Dalia and Gabby, could please give the information on Spanish interpretation, please.
Muy buenas noches a todos. Vamos a empezar esta reunión a las 7 de la noche, hoy día 28 de noviembre del 2022. Esta es una reunión pública de la contabilidad de la policía y esta reunión va a ser grabada y va a haber interpretación en español para las personas que lo necesitan.
Thank you. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Andrea and Seven Star. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. Finally, the closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. Please note that the automatic captioning service is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to public meetings notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation in other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland's administrative code and Oregon state law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature as the commissioners are presenting or discussing things. If attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and the answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting's record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of the screen. And now I'll move it over to Tirsa, Commissioner Tirsa, for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Ayumide. Good evening. The city has asked for a moratorium on land acknowledgements, but we also have requests for members to have some form of land acknowledgement continue. Co-chairs would like to recognize the limits of any land acknowledgement and the harm that can be done by inadequate or disrespectful land acknowledgement. We are working to find a respectful way to continue to center Indigenous voices. Please let's take a moment of silence.
Thank you, Tirsa. I'll take a moment to read over the community agreements. Go to the next slide, please. Do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and to gently call in our colleagues and collaborators in this meeting? Awesome, thank you so much. I will pass it over to the co-chairs to discuss the timeline. Oh, Obi, I think if you are speaking.
Perfect. Yeah. Yep, that is me. Let me just share my view. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. This is a meeting. This meeting is a part of the Police Accountability Commission's powers and duties phase of work. It is expected to go into January. and will end when all 3 of the phases outcome documents are approved. This is the first of several phases in which the PAC will directly begin deciding on what will go into the recommendations that the PAC will send to City Council for a new police accountability system, including a new oversight board. This phase focuses on the functions of the new system. Future phases of work will develop the form of the new system, as well as how it relates to the rest of the city government and the transition plan from our current system to the new one, before Commission presents all proposed changes to the City Council in 2023 for the consideration and approval. Following today, here are the next few meetings of the PAC. There is no meeting on November 24th because that is the city and state's observance of Thanksgiving.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I saw staff. Did you have your hand
Yeah,
up?
just the slide is correct in here. Just wanted to mention that as we go, that the tentatives are actually no longer tentative. Just wanted to add that in. Apologies for that it was tentative at the time the slides were made. They're not tentative. So thank you.
No. Skipping to this portion, next Thursday, December 1st, is a subcommittee on structural oversight's first meeting. On slide 8, this slide is a current project plan for the powers and duties phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It will be updated as needed throughout this phase of work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members as to the functions of the new system. Today's meeting is part of the green box with the red border in the left part of the screen. This slide shows the outcome documents for the powers and duties phase based on the agenda and scope approved by the commission. These documents each correspond to one of the subcommittees. One document will focus on how the new system will access needed information to do its work. The second on how it will handle administrative misconduct allegations against individual officers. And the third on how it will contribute to structural oversight of the police bureau. And this is a review of today's meeting, which is our intro meeting. And today's meeting agenda includes a review of the subcommittee's mandate, followed by discussion on how the subcommittee should structure its work, and then looking at the work the PAC has already done on these issues during the fact-finding phase. There is also an open public comment period towards the end of the agenda. Okay, facilitators, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. So I would like to just give you guys a little bit of time to introduce yourself since this is the first meeting. So I will actually, I guess I could start with Commissioner Monica, and then maybe you can pass it on to the other commissioners just to have a quick introduction of who you are.
Monica Arce. I am one of the commissioners and a member of this subcommittee. I go by she, her, ella pronouns, and really excited to get this going. Should I pass it on to somebody?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll pass it on to Obi.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. My name is Obi Igwoju. I use he, him pronouns. I've lived in Portland for just over 3 years now, and I'm my day job is and sometimes night job is a hand surgeon or orthopedic surgeon in Portland, Clackamas, and Hillsborough. I've enjoyed every minute of working in this commission and respect the hard work, respect the extremely hard work that was done before I was a member of the commission. I am one of the co-chairs. I'm the co-chair at this time of the Access to Information subcommittee. I look forward to working with you all. Thanks, guys. And I'll pass it to the full committee co-chair, Tirsa.
Thank you, Obi. I'm Tirsa Oriana, she, her pronouns. I'm here because I want to really see police accountability in the city of Portland. I'm originally from Southern California. but I've been here for almost a decade. Welcome, everyone. And Seema, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Simab Husseini. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a community organizer, began organizing around Muslim communities as well as violence reduction kind of early on in life, a lot more as a kid, and then moved up here about 13 years ago, began to see a lot of gaps and holes within the rights around Black and Brown communities, began to organize professionally around that in the last almost decade. And yeah, have done some police accountability work. A lot of the root of my work was based on a lot of information provided by Portland Cop Watch. What better way to understand than that library of knowledge provided to us for free, and organized around JTTF as my first official entrance into social justice issues, particularly around law enforcement, police accountability. It was started around 7 years ago, and I find myself through those paths here today as a commissioner on the Police Accountability Commission. For right now, my day job, it's also rooted in revisualizing what the criminal legal system should mean. And I work with Multnomah County as a Justice Fellowship Program Coordinator, where we are to build a pilot fellowship of community leaders with lived and impacted experiences with the criminal legal system to sit as equitable stakeholders at a table of the leaders of the criminal legal system in Multnomah County as we know it. Hopefully dream big. I will pass it on to Dan Handelman.
Why, thank you. My name is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a member of Portland Cop Watch, as well as this commission. I'm a member of this subcommittee, and I'm also co-chair of the subcommittee on officer accountability, which you see in the chat was recently renamed from something else. And I also offered to co-chair this, just for the record, this subcommittee, if that's something that is able to be done. So I just want to make sure that gets on the record as well. I have had not great experiences with popcorning, so I'm going to turn it back to our facilitator to pick the next person.
Thank you, Commissioner Handelman. I believe Commissioner Angie, have you spoken yet?
No, I think I'm the last one. I think, yeah, out of the commissioners. I am Commissioner Angie Tomlinson on this subcommittee, and I am very grateful that I'm not one of the one of the co-chairs of this subcommittee. Thank you, Obi, for taking that on, and thank you, Tirsa, for taking on being a commission, the whole commission's co-chair. It's a lot of work, and I appreciate both of you, and I appreciate everybody else that does all the work on here. I've been on this commission since the beginning, and I really admire all the passion and dedication that everybody has on this commission. And let's see, my day job is not anything to do with social justice. I kind of come from PTA momish type stuff and environmental justice stuff or background. I'm an environmental manager for a large company, so a little bit different, but this is really important work, and I feel like some of the skills that I have in project management can kind of help lend towards us organizing our thoughts and moving forward, and I have a huge passion for this also. So thank you, and it's really nice to meet Obi kind of for the first time, but also work with everybody again. So thank you.
Wonderful. Next, we'll go over the review of our agenda today.
Thanks. So we'll go over the subcommittee mandate, and if I could get the ability to share screen, please. Yeah, okay. So the subcommittee's mandate is laid out. The full commission co-chairs had established a sorry about this, had established one-page documents kind of laying out what the subcommittees do. And essentially, this is all posted on the website as well for those following along. But essentially, the primary purpose of this subcommittee is to develop what is called the areas of agreement on access to information. And we'll talk about what that is as we go through each of the documents that give authority to the commission or requirements of the commission for what parts of the new system will be created. So of those, the first of those is section 210 of the charter. This was ballot measure 26-217 approved by the voters of the city of Portland in November 2020. And the core of the charter text focused on access to information is in section 2-1007, which is on powers of the board, of the new oversight board that the Police Accountability Commission is creating. And however, there are a couple things in section 2-1006 on independent authority, which implicitly refer to this as ensuring that the board has authority to exercise independent judgment, as well as ensuring non-interference can certainly be construed to mean not inhibiting the flow of information necessary for the new oversight board to do its job. Again, the bulk of it is in section 2-1007, in which section A refers to receiving and investigating complaints, including the power to subpoena and compel documents. Section C refers to gathering and compelling all evidence, as well as accessing all police records to the extent allowed by federal and state law, and compelling statements from witnesses, including officers. And section D actually refers to compelling sworn officers of PPB as well as their supervisors to participate in investigations, and authorizes the oversight to discipline for non-participation, incomplete participation, or untruthfulness up to and including termination. Before we move on to the council resolutions, I wanted to pass it over to co-chairs to see if they had anything they'd like to add.
Thanks. I kind of agree with, I think that's fairly straightforward. And we're actually giving us a pretty broad spectrum of what we can look at in this co-chair, and I'm sure there will be more to go along, but for that, I completely agree with you.
Okay. So then there are two council resolutions that set up the commission. One of them is Council Resolution 37527. And it has the sort of scope of the commission in its exhibits. It doesn't actually give a lot of information about what the oversight board can do or should do. It's more about the commission itself. So instead of spending time on that, we'll go to Resolution 37548, which is the scope of work of the commission, and which includes lots of the mandated duties of the commission. So for this one, the two places that give specific tasks to the commission that relate to access to information are under definitions, where it again refers to independent judgment and interference by bureaus and commissioners as things that the commission needs to define, a portion of which may relate again possibly to access to information. More directly, under powers of the new oversight system, it refers to the power to compel testimony and also the method of obtaining testimony. And then separately refers to access to police records, evidence and data, and access to police databases as authorized by federal and state law. And the task charged by the City Council to the Police Accountability Commission is to develop a more detailed explanation about how these will function. And that's the task that was given to the Police Accountability Commission. Anything on this before we move on to the agenda and scope of the PAC, co-chairs?
No, I think that's also a lot of the meat of what we're going to be discussing is in this specific section of this charter resolution 37548. I think that's going to have to be teased out quite a bit, and then make sure that when the help we get, we'll discuss this later on today, the people who might help us out with putting the right things on paper will be focusing on number 2 and how we can do that appropriately and make it airtight so that whatever we end up suggesting complies with, you know, city, state, and federal laws, but also makes sure that the commission that will end up being formed has reasonable access to information and reasonable ability to do its job. Thank you.
And thank you. So next on the list is the Police Accountability Commission's own agenda and scope. So this is a document that the PAC created in March and updated in September, which lays out all of the tasks associated with or required of the PAC and separated it into our phases of work. The third of those phases of work is the powers and duties phase, which, as Co-Chair Obi mentioned earlier in the meeting, is the phase of work that the commission is now in. And in that section on the powers and duties phase, it describes a great deal of the discussion items which will be addressed during this phase of work, and specifically creates the areas of agreement on access to information as a document that is a required outcome of this phase of work. Within that includes receiving and compelling testimony, subpoena power, and access to police records. Other portions of this section of powers and duties you may find relate more to other subcommittees, but as it relates to this subcommittee and access to information, it's what's in items A and B here, and then creating the areas of agreement on access to information. Anything on this one from co-chairs, please?
I actually think you hinted at the next review portion of how the subcommittee relates to other PAC, so I'll wait for that one, but otherwise agreed.
Yeah, and so the last thing before we get to that point is the subcommittee timeline. Creating a draft version of this areas of agreement on access to information is the charge of this subcommittee. And in terms of the timeline, there will be roughly 4 meetings of this subcommittee in which to achieve that goal. Which is to say, achieving that goal means referring that document to the full commission for them to review, discuss, adapt, and eventually approve. Each of the meetings, we've scheduled the first 3 of them. There's one today, obviously. There's one on December 12th, which is 2 weeks from today. And the third is on December 29th, which is about 2.5 weeks after that one. And then the 4th one is yet to be scheduled, but will be sometime in January. And so with each of those gaps of roughly 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more than 2 weeks, the idea is to utilize those 2 weeks in between each to develop new ideas and new text, to send those in to co-chairs and staff, which will be collated and then redistributed out for members of the subcommittee to take a look at, edit, and send their proposed edits back in, and then at a future meeting discuss those proposed edits, discuss the general all the different discussion items that the subcommittee has, and then kind of repeat the process until the document is ready to be referred to the full commission. And with that, to discuss the relationship of this subcommittee to the other subcommittees, I'll pass it over to the co-chairs. Thank you.
So thanks for that one. And yeah, I think that we discussed beforehand that's if other people will participate in other subcommittees, might have that have worked well beforehand, where we have spaced intervals between our meetings and then discuss in between. This is my first subcommittee, so I think I will do the best at making sure that we continue to move forward on a daily and weekly basis, and not just in between meetings, make sure that we can stick to our timeline. As for the last section, which is how the subcommittee relates to the other PAC powers and duties phase subcommittees, I think even though, while this doesn't seem to pack a punch in the specific 3 subcommittees that are going on right now, access to information is crucial in making sure that other 2 subcommittees and future phases or future portions of the commission or the future commission would work. We are making a grand assumption, but one that is crucial in saying that information needs to be accessed for the commission to do its job appropriately. So making sure that we have a well thought out and appropriate document that can state our, I'm not saying request, but state what we think would be best for the future commission in regards to accessing police information or city information in a appropriate manner that isn't held up by regulation will be the best thing moving forward, so that the other portions or other subcommittees can appropriately do their job without having to worry about the hang-ups of not having access information. And as we have seen in other jurisdictions that have that we agreed were best practices, as well as some practices to avoid, this can be an issue. So I think a well thought out portion of us making sure that we have kind of airtight is not the right word, but airtight document regarding access to information that is well accepted both in this subcommittee as well as the full committee would be important. Oh, I'm sorry, I see, is it okay to pass to Commissioner Dan at this time?
Commissioner Handelman.
To Commissioner Dan, is that okay?
Oh, thank you. I'm on another subcommittee, as I said at the top. So I'm hoping that when we talk about how we relate to the other subcommittees, that I will be able to, basically cross-pollinate information that we have in the Officer Accountability Subcommittee that we need to talk about here. Certainly, it's very crucial, as you said, for the investigations, for the new board to have access to witnesses and to officers and to records. But you also mentioned kind of briefly that some of this might be problems that we run into that are embedded in laws and or even I would say the police contract that we have no power to change. So I had suggested in the other subcommittee that we keep a rolling record as part of the garden plot of things that we want to ask the city council to do to make sure that laws get changed appropriately so that this board can do its work. So I'm hoping that's an okay idea to propose for this subcommittee as well.
I think that.
Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry, click it twice. I agree with that, Commissioner Dan. And when we kind of did have our discussion just a couple sections from now, definitely repeating that so it can be kind of stated in our meeting notes too, or our meeting agenda too, that is a specific thing to look at later on. You kind of also, and I'll say it over the discussion later on, but you had another suggestion at a previous PAC meeting about contingencies as well. And I think that kind of fits in a little bit what you were saying beforehand. But yeah, completely agree.
Okay, well, staff.
Yeah, and the last thing that's worth mentioning in sort of this review section, I think we're at the end of the review section otherwise.
Yes.
Thank you. I mean, is what the outcome documents of this will look like. So we've been looking at areas of agreement. There have been a couple examples that have been shared, which will have some examples of from the Charter Commission, which are forward-looking ones, whereas the PAC ones are, to date, have been very much assessing the current situation or even looking a little bit backward. So there's been a focus on the sort of bolded header of what is the agreement to do going forward. And to whatever degree, there's a couple examples that some have more or less support text. And the PAC has to date erred on the side of less supporting text and more clarity on the agreements, but to try and be somewhat forward-looking in how to frame the next step and then allow for other documentation to provide context and explanation. And a couple examples are here. We'll also look at the fact-finding phase outcome documents, which also take on the form of areas of agreement a little bit later in this agenda. So there'll be a couple other examples to show also. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. So yeah, this does conclude the end of our review. And if we could have the slides up, we're going to go into a discussion on, thank you, on the mandate. Oh, no, I was right. So it's a round table discussion. So basically discussion of who you would like to hear from for the briefings. So next on the agenda is to discuss a briefing of who subcommittee members would like to hear from, invite in and brief on, and be briefed by.
And with this one, if you just want to do the raise the hand model and we can pick on whomever, that'd be great.
Yep. So again, be brief. Let me facilitate. Weighted stack facilitation, be constructive and forward-looking with the discussion to make the commissioners' work more successful in the future. So thank you. And who would like to start? Here, coach, co-chair Tirsa. Everyone's moving around in the screen, so my pardon if I'm getting a little lost. I see someone pointing. I don't know what that means, Monica. Oh,
I was pointing
Commissioner.
at Commissioner Tirsa
Yeah.
on my screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Commissioner Tirsa, you're still muted. I don't know if you were trying to talk.
Yeah, so earlier we were briefed, I believe this was back in spring, from CRC, the Citizen Review Committee. And I think having them come back, at that briefing, they had slightly touched on having difficulty accessing records, and I would like to have them or invite them to come back so that we can possibly figure out other barriers that we may have not heard at that briefing with accessing records.
Thank you. Commissioner or co-chair Obi.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think Commissioner Tirsa's recommendation is great. And I would like to second that. In this similar vein, this might be difficult, and we can sidebar that in the future to see exactly what we're talking about. But I would like to talk or maybe bring in someone who handles IT for the city or the police. I am imagining that these are two separate entities at this point, but handling IT in regards to making sure that there is a way to facilitate safe, I guess, encrypted and secure transfer of information to the future commissioners or future commission. That'd be my first suggestion for something to look at.
Commissioner Monica.
Thank you. One of the things that keeps rushing through my head is this idea that sometimes subpoenaing and compelling testimony could backfire in that then that police officer that has been subpoenaed and forced to testify may not be able to be sued later by whatever they have testified will not be used later in criminal proceedings. And I would like to know if there is a way to get around that, or if that, what would have to happen to be able to not only compel that testimony, but not take away the rights of victims to be able to sue later using that testimony. So I guess legal counsel on how to get that to be as effective as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Commissioner, I saw your hand up, Commissioner Angie. Do you still want to speak?
Thank you. I'm Edie. Mine is a little bit more tentative in that the city of Portland has a really small bureau called the Office of Community Technology, and they are very small. And I don't know if information from them would be helpful on this committee or not, but it might be something for us to discuss and to talk about if we did want to get in touch with them, just because they're a newer bureau, and they are definitely part of the communities that are underserved in Portland. So they might have some access to people that we're trying to get to, but I also know that our subject might be a little daunting for them, because they are just trying to figure out a way to get technology to people that are underserved. They are not trying to figure out this really large social justice issue that we are dealing with. So so I'm tentative to say that we should get in touch with them, but maybe we can discuss it a little bit down the line a little bit if we want information from them, or if we want to talk to them.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Excuse me, Angie, and Commissioner Monica, because you talked to Commissioner Obi, and then Commissioner Dan.
I just wanted to add to Commissioner Monica's point about specifically almost like figuring out the legalities of compelling testimony and subpoena work. I'm not sure if that would involve the city attorney as well, but just to kind of add some bullet points to our notes of which legal counsels we have to discuss with, whether that's the city or representing other parties in the city of Portland. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Handelman.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, well, we talked a little bit at the other subcommittee about having in a labor attorney that's not associated with the city, and then perhaps also inviting in both somebody from the city attorney's office and an attorney for the police association at the same time, so that they can sort of give their own take on the things that we're trying to get at. So I'm hoping that this subcommittee agrees with that, and maybe we can have that presentation at the full commission, because I think everybody's going to have to understand those concepts anyway, and that way both subcommittees will be covered. So as mentioned, the idea of bringing the Citizen Review Committee back, the CRC doesn't really, I mean, they access the information that was already investigated. So I think we also, in addition to them, we should have the IPR come back, because they were saying that in order to get some of the police records, they have to put in public records requests, which is ridiculous, right? We don't want the review board having to put in a public records request to get access to the information. And it just occurred to me as we're having this discussion that we weren't assigned this, but several of the things in the process that of the officer accountability subcommittee work have to do with getting information back to the complainants after they file their complaint. Make sure that they know what's going on throughout their process, and that they get the findings at the end. So in terms of access to information, maybe we can start to talk about that too, and make sure that the mechanics and the question of that, how complainants get access to information, is maybe something that we can look at as a subcommittee as well. I hope that's an okay idea.
Co-chair Obi.
I have two things to say. Number one, Commissioner Dan, that's a great idea. I don't think it would fall anywhere else currently in our overall plan. So with access to information, if we're going to be dealing with some of the, I don't want to say less important, but some of the more rote type of things in regards to computer access and such, I think access for some of the complainants or people looking into information in the system should probably fall under a small window of what we're doing. So that's a good idea to write down. I'm gonna, if I could get a re-thing, I saw that Samir raised his hand, so let me have him say something, and then I will say my second portion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Just to clarify, I think we'll need to double check where that goes exactly. There are a couple other parts of future phases that it might relate to as well. So I think that's something that, at least for this meeting, can go into a garden plot and then circle back and get some clarity for this subcommittee. If it's already sort of penciled in somewhere else, then we'd want to follow the agenda and scope, but if not, then it's certainly available.
Thank you, staff.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. The second thing is, bringing up another big subject, which will likely, and similarly, I'll probably have Samir comment right afterwards too, but what might fall into our scope of work is body cameras. That is not specifically stated in our, I guess, in the framework, but it has been mentioned, and in the research finding phase, the fact finding phase, that was brought up in a couple of other jurisdictions. I think we're still waiting on the final results of what happens in Portland, but that is another subject that we will eventually have to look at. So in regards to this portion of our meeting today, discussing who might be helpful to talk to, I think people might have a better suggestion, but a body camera expert of maybe one of the cities that we have researched beforehand, such as like San Diego or Washington, DC, whether or not they could help in how they dealt with that sort of information moving on to a commission, to the independent commission. So, thanks.
Staff?
Yeah, just to, as requested, comment on that particular point. For those who might be wondering, wouldn't body camera footage be considered access to police records? Possibly. That is being, there is bargaining going on between the city and the PPA on how body cameras will work. And it may be that that footage is not, it may be footage that is maintained by the police bureau, in which case it is a police record. It may be footage that is maintained by another entity within the city government, in which case it would be a record, but not necessarily a police record in terms of the strictest definition of that. Either way, that's information, certainly, that this subcommittee and the full PAC probably has opinions on, in terms of the level of access that the new oversight board should have to that. So it may make sense to consider that, at least until and unless it is considered a police record later on, as sort of a fourth category of information to determine access to. The other three being access to police records, subpoena power, I should say, and compelling testimony as well. So yeah, that's just a little extra context there. Thank you.
Commissioner Handelman?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think the round robin, everybody's supposed to talk. So if somebody else needs to go, please go ahead. I was going to also respond to the question about the compelling officer testimony. This is something that I've been looking at for a very long time, unfortunately. And a lot of the compelling officer testimony, kind of goes back to something called the U.S. Constitution that we're going to be stuck up against, where everybody in this country has the Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate themselves criminally. So that's why you can't compel an officer to testify against themselves and then use it in a criminal proceeding, because otherwise you violate their constitutional right. But I don't think, and I'm not sure, Commissioner Arce, what you're referring to, I don't think that prevents that information from being used in a lawsuit, but that would be a good question for us to get answered when we have the attorneys in to come talk to us, because I can't imagine why. I mean, it may be that has to go under, kind of lock and key or something, where the judge is the only one who can hear it. I never heard before that the compelled testimony was a problem for a lawsuit. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Handelman. We haven't heard from Commissioners CMOB yet. Any words?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, still, let's see. Oh, Commissioner Monica.
It'd be also good to look at access to the records, the prior records of police officers and prior proceedings and prior investigations and their history with the Bureau. And will we have access to that? Will the oversight body have access to those records, and how to compel that would be good to look into.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Any other comment? Commissioner Seymour.
To the effect of what Monica just brought up, Commissioner Monica was saying about being able to get police records. Oftentimes, I think we may have to refer to the discipline guide that can possibly help us with that. But typically, there's usually arbitration issues surrounding relevancy. And oftentimes, though we'll see it relevant, they will try to process and call it for, say it's irrelevant to the issue at hand. So there's usually those clauses that are set up that we would have to navigate, and oftentimes this can actually be, this is symbolic and emblematic of how oftentimes you can take what should be a case and have a simple timeline and have it elongated because of multiple inquiries that we have to surf through and fight through their arbitration. So these are kind of things to anticipate and look out for. Commissioner Handelman would probably know a lot about this.
And I see it's up. Are you finished, Commissioner Seymour? All right. Commissioner Handelman.
So actually what I was going to say, Commissioner Hussaini, was that the place where this comes into the current system that I know of is when the police review board, or I think also if it doesn't go to the police review board and somebody else is deciding the discipline, that the officer's history plays into that. Because I've seen in police review board reports many times, they say this officer has no history of misconduct, or this officer has had 3 other times that they ran their car into something. And so that was counted as an aggravating factor when they were considering discipline. So there are parts of the system already where officer history is considered relevant. So we should make sure to think about that and put that into our documents, to fast forward. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get to that level of detail in describing the process of the system. So the more stuff that we can look at, like that kind of information in this subcommittee, I think the better. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Angie, did you speak up on this topic? Okay, I'm just making sure that I got everybody at least once. Any other comments, thoughts? I can kind of go over a little, go ahead, Commissioner Monica.
Thank you. When I was in the subcommittee of research and looking into Philadelphia, what they have done is they have an open to the public website that lists all of the investigations that are open currently in the system. They don't have police officer names on that until the investigation is completed. But once the investigation is complete, every single case that is completed is listed on the website, and it's open for anyone to see the things, the name of the officer and the discipline that was, and there is a full record. And their version of accountability is basically access to all this information to the public. And it would be really nice to put something like that together.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Staff?
Yeah, so part of the ambiguity, two points. Part of the ambiguity around the earlier point about whether or not complainant access to information is part of this or not is that the agenda and scope does talk about public access to information being under the 4th phase of work. So that is definitely something that will come up in the next phase, because we're currently in the 3rd. Just a quick note there, and again, that doesn't answer the earlier question, but just wanted to flag that. The other point goes way back to the beginning of this process, which is to co-chair Obi's question about different IT systems. It is, for most things within the city, there are in fact 2 IT systems. One that is used by police and one that is not. And so it may be helpful to explore that more from a purely technical perspective, certainly, and in terms of how information would literally be transferred and how the access would work in that very granular say if the subcommittee is interested in that. And the last question was just, as more folks are suggested, people or institutions to reach out to come brief, it would be helpful, as some members of the subcommittee have already done, to define whether or not that's a desired briefing for this subcommittee or for the full commission, as a couple members have already, just so that we know if it's something that you can get deeper into the details of here, then it might be more valuable at a subcommittee. Whereas if it's more broad in terms of can affect the work of multiple subcommittees, that might be worth trying to set up a joint subcommittee meeting or a full commission meeting briefing, whichever's preferable. And certainly scheduling will affect that as well. But if members have a suggestion, that's helpful for staff to help provide options to those folks.
Thank you, staff. Oh, Commissioner Handelman.
Staff, can you, I think that what you just said may have answered the question that popped up in the Q&A, that the stuff about public access to information is in the next phase. Is that correct? Because what it says in the Q&A is there overlap with the effort to create a city transparency advocate, and no, that's for journalists and civilian public record requests. So is that what you're saying? That's going to be in phase 4? Is that correct?
That's a good question. So just to read it into the record, is there any overlap here with the effort to create a city transparency advocate? I think that is more for journalist / civilian public record requests, but not sure if that dovetails with what you're building here. I don't personally know anything about that effort at this moment. That's something that can look into for the future, and hopefully provide information to the full commission about. With relation to Commissioner and Dan's question about what's in the next phase, what it says there is pretty minimal at present in terms of details, but it says public access and transparency, including what reports are public, what meetings are open to the public, and also what info on investigations is public. And that was built out a little bit more in the fact-finding phase discussions around, in particular, sections of the other jurisdictions and subject matter experts documents, especially that last part on info on investigations, but also meetings and reports now I think about it. So yeah, I think that yes would be the answer, but I can't speak very definitively about the city transparency advocate effort, as that's not something I'm personally familiar with.
Thank you, staff. I just kind of want to recap a little bit of what I heard in terms of the folks who are interested in bringing to the subcommittee for discussion. I heard CRC, I heard our IPR, somebody that would, city attorneys, just for more of the legalities of some of the things that Samir was just talking about. Someone that might have access to the information of where the body cameras are going. Body camera footage is going, maybe looking at the discipline guide for to address like access to records of the history of the police officer, if it's viable. I mean, is there anything else that I missed? I just want to make sure I caught all of that. Commissioner Handelman.
Yeah, so I had kind of repeated a suggestion from the other group that in addition to the city attorney, we should have the police association attorney.
Thank you.
And we also, I think, should talk to an independent labor attorney to find out the answers to some of these questions about the whether it's legal to access these documents and people.
Thank you. Okay, and Commissioner Monica.
One other thing that came to mind while I was looking at Philadelphia, one of the things that their accountability commission has ability to do is go to the scene of the crime.
Can you say that one more time? You cut out.
The commission is able, members of the commission, investigators that are part of the accountability commission in Philadelphia are able to go to the scene of the crime or go to where the event happened to gather information and do full investigation of the scene at the same time as the police are investigating. So they get their information at the same time. So it doesn't, so it provides them the ability to get the information without having to rely only on the police records, right? So is there something in our system that would prevent that from happening? And if not, we should, I think, be able to do that here in Portland. And if there is something that would prevent us from happening, we should look into that.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Okay, I think at this moment, if there are not any other suggestions, we'll take a small break till about 8:10. Does that work for the commission? Okay, great. We'll see you at 8:10. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. So I guess we'll go on to the more of a discussion on some of the topics that let's see here. We'll go more into a discussion of everything that we just kind of discussed earlier in terms of the folks you were interested in bringing. Couple questions to consider. What are other factors or assumptions to consider in this process? What sections of the PAC fact-finding phase documents are relevant to this process? These are some things that you can kind of discuss just as launch points. This is an open discussion and we'll ask you to follow the normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak. Even though you can speak multiple times, please be facilitated and remember that the commission uses a weighted stack for discussion. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. So can I ask the co-chairs to get us started in the discussion, please?
Sure. Thank you for getting us back in here.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're looking at what other factors or assumptions to consider in this process, I think specifically to access information, I kind of referenced this before. It assumes that what the other two subcommittees, or whatever they are doing, kind of runs parallel to us. And I think when they ask the same question, it assumes that our access to information is going to be meaningful. When what we end up proposing will give the other two subcommittees and the rest of the document enough power to make meaningful changes or provide meaningful oversight and accountability to police as well. I think that's where I'll start it off and I'll add a bit more later.
I didn't hear the last thing that you said, Commissioner Obi. Can you repeat that for me, please?
Oh yeah, that I said that our job and in this subcommittee in regards to access to information, that I guess other groups or other subcommittees are assuming that we are going to get a meaningful amount out of this, and that would allow, or there would be a meaningful access to information in regards to other things like structural oversight, so that they can do their job appropriately. So they'll need good access to information for the new oversight board to function appropriately. And it's like, it doesn't take much to say that it is very important for us to be able to it's very important for us to function well in this sense, so that everything else works. And it's not an overstatement to say those sort of things in regards to this specific portion.
Thank you. Oh, staff.
Yeah, just wanted to add in that there's some assumption, it's actually partially written into the charter that there will be a staff for the new oversight agency, which will include investigators. So as you're going through this process and exercise, it may be helpful to indicate, you know, especially to what degree, if any, there's a difference of access of information or what sort of accreditation or accreditation is the correct word, for staff to get, as well as for members of the oversight board to get in order to obtain this information. So you may have noticed that there was a lot of, to the extent allowed by federal or state law, part of that, not all of it, relates to getting certain accreditations or making certain commitments, like an NDA type of situation, in order to non-disclosure agreement type of situation, in order to access certain records. And if that is different at all for staff versus oversight board members, which it may not be, but if that's something that the subcommittee would like to consider, that's just an additional sort of wrinkle to consider.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Obi.
Thanks. And adding to that, I think it has to be an assumption that things are done in a medical term. We'd say, like, you know, patients have their personal information is protected. I think similarly, I think whatever oversight body there is in the future has to respect, I guess, the cities or city, state, and federal guidelines on securing information. Even though I think we would be, or the main majority of us, probably going to be pushing for more information to be coming to the oversight bodies, whether that's, you know, paper or electronic access, as Commissioner Monica suggested with Philadelphia actually going to sites. But there has to be some sort of, you know, private or ability for us to protect information privately that follows city guidelines, and whether or not it's electronic or like paper information, or even speech with one another. I think that'll have to kind of be set.
Thank you, Commissioner Obi. Commissioner Tirsa, and then Commissioner Dan.
There's a question in the Q&A that reads, how will you go about obtaining information that doesn't exist, that hasn't been obtained? And so reading that question, I think that that's something that we should look into for this subcommittee, as we are trying to look at access to and attaining access to information, how the new oversight board will be able to attain information that's not easily accessible, and setting up a process for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa. Commissioner Dan.
Yes, thank you. One of the questions that we're answering now is what sections of the fact-finding phase are relevant, and so I believe the experts document, section C, the City of Portland, you know, existing system, item number 2 from barriers, and the jurisdictions document, section Y, are what we're going to need to look at. So you know, maybe staff is pulling those up now.
Yeah. Yes, he is. So the first one you said was section 2.
The first one is the one that's up now, section C,
C2.
from experts.
Mm-hmm.
So are we reading this out loud? Are we reading to ourselves? What do we want to do, co-chair? Or chair, since you don't have a co.
Actually, maybe we should go ahead and just Yeah, and I went through this before, but maybe we should go ahead and just read the bolded statements and then the rest can be read to ourselves. Just so it's like read into the record again. So I can do that. I'm on the mic right now, but this is under the access to information subheading or S heading, and the subheading C1, the oversight body should have direct access to police files. And subsection C2 is the oversight body should be able to compel testimony from police officers as a condition of continued employment.
Sorry, I was muted here. Just piping in. This is the PAC identified barriers to police accountability in Portland presently and best practices as well. This is under the barriers. Number 2, important parts of the accountability process are inaccessible to the public, and specifically this law and policy section refers to information for the compelling testimony, the things we've already identified. And then the third one is the best practices and practices to avoid from other jurisdictions, where section Y refers to access to information directly. And it is a very long document, so please bear with me here. And there's 2 parts. The oversight body has the ability to subpoena evidence, and the oversight body has the ability to compel officer participation and testimony.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Handelman.
Right. I mean, I had this pulled up on my computer, but I wasn't able to read through Y1, or apparently there were practices to avoid that were at the bottom of Y2. Can you put those back up, staff? Thank you very much.
Sure, sorry about that.
Did you need to scroll up? Yeah. Commissioner Co-Chair Obi.
Thanks. Are there any other, and I'll ask staff to this, are there any other portions of these documents that might cross over? I think when I was looking earlier in the week, I Control F like some of the draft documents and search things like cameras and stuff too. But did you find any other major things that we could look at?
Staff.
Yes, also using Control F quite a bit. Yeah, so I will maybe start with the barriers document. Actually, we're already in other jurisdictions. So these are not necessarily directly related, but maybe things to kind of consider as part of this process for this subcommittee. One of them was maybe seems very indirect, but reaching into other access, the same mention I made earlier about staff might need different levels of access or different accreditations versus oversight body members. If folks outside of city structures are used for assistance, they would probably need to have the ability to gain access depending on their particular function for the oversight agency to the records that they would need to do their jobs, depending on what the nature of the help is. The second thing was open evidentiary hearings. You know, in order to have open evidentiary hearings, you need to have evidence. That's more an assumption than a direct thing as well. Another thing was the ability to propose the release of otherwise confidential information. There's very specific details for this for New York City that maybe are not particularly relevant to go into now, but it can create a hurdle if not just specifically addressed if other entities are concerned that giving information to the oversight board would mean that it is released. So that's just a thing to consider, that if creating the ability to release information publicly, that might be a thing to be prepared for. And then finally, and most directly, the two most direct things were Section Y, as Commissioner Dan mentioned, and R4. So R4 includes must gather evidence, including video evidence, and must, you know, conduct and record interviews. So I'll scroll in just a moment, but this one might be worth reading in full. And that's the other jurisdictions document. In the subject matter experts document, exactly as Commissioner Dan mentioned, Section C, which is the direct access to information portion, is the only thing identified there. These were already shown. And then in the final section, which is the final document from the fact-finding phase, which is the barriers and best practices. Again, the law and policy, sorry about this, the law and policy section, as previously shown under item 2, was certainly one of them. Another one that came up was under effectiveness, under participation and fact-finding. So this was an identified barrier in Portland that the system does not encourage, compel, or require officers to participate. And it's under lacking the comprehensive power necessary to be effective at reducing misconduct. And then there was one final item also under barriers and best practices, which is under culture. And this was sort of implicit as well. In particular, the last part of not serving as witnesses. And as previously mentioned in the review of the charter, compliance with investigations, even if the officer themselves is not the officer alleged to have committed misconduct, is one of the powers of the new oversight board. That was under Section D, I believe, of 2-1007. So that's where the witnesses are reporting on other officers section would be relevant. Does that answer your question, Co-Chair Obi? Is there more? Yeah,
and I actually, thank you. I think I ran into a couple of these things as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. And if anyone needs any part of that screen shared, please just feel free to ask. No.
Thank you, staff. Co-chair Obi, you're
Yeah.
muted. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I think something that we really need to look at is a lot of these assumptions, or a lot of these things that we want to employ assume that there's going to be a fast transfer of information, specifically with regard to timeframes and getting things shifted over from if there's two separate IT departments, information shifted one place to another. So that's just something to look at. Like we're making some of the assumptions not in a vacuum, but in an efficient world. And I think you've seen from historically that these sort of things are not necessarily efficient. So as we structure this next system, seeing if we can erase part of the inefficiency to make sure the commission can do the best as possible.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Monica?
If someone is knowledgeable on this, what does the contract between the city and the police association say about this particular topic, access to information, sharing information? Is there specifics in the contract about this?
I am not sure. Staff, do you know? Or have we had a specific deep dive into the police contract with the city?
We have not. That's not an area of my expertise, but I do think that there are people within either the Bureau of Human Resources or possibly the city attorney's office that might be worth reaching out to in order to have them come and kind of talk through certain aspects of that as they relate. And Commissioner Dan has just put in the chat the actual link to the collective bargaining agreement, which anyone can look at, of course, as well. But if there's perhaps legal analysis that may be helpful, that could be someone to invite in as well.
Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, so that I was pulling up that PPA contract. So Article 61 is the Police Officers Bill of Rights, it's called. And those are things that, you know, again, we don't have the power to change as a commission. This contract's in place until 2025, but in theory, they're going to have to renegotiate it, even though there's the state law that says the city doesn't have to negotiate about the new oversight board that was created by people voting it into place. Purely, if there's stuff that's in the existing contract, it would be in the city's best interest to renegotiate this. You know, it doesn't override what's already in the contract. So like 61.1 talks about protection by this Bill of Rights. 61.2 says that it only applies to non-criminal investigations that might end up in discipline. So, you know, again, the constitutional questions around criminal cases is handled in a separate place. There has to be interview notice. They have to be told about what the investigation is about, and they're given information about the complainants, which is something that I don't know where to flag that, but that's in our, you know, the access to information I said about the civilians. We also have to ask about the officers' access to information, right? So let's think about that. They have the right to a legal counsel, and they get interviewed while they're on duty. It says here the interview shall take place at a Portland Police Bureau facility, but the charter says that the offices of the board will not be located in a police facility, so that's could potentially be a conflict. You know, so it goes on and on. There's all sorts of rights in there. So particularly about what we were talking about before, 61 point, sorry to be so specific, 61.2.2.10 says if during investigatory interview testimony raises notice of potential criminal conduct, which is always in the case with shootings, the member will be informed of the right to consult with a criminal defense attorney And it doesn't apply if the member was already given a guarantee notice beforehand. And the guarantee notice is kind of what we've been talking about, where they say, we're going to compel you to testify about this, but as a result, we won't be able to use what you say here to prosecute you. And I guess to paint a rosy picture, although I don't know this has ever happened, just because you compel the officer to testify and you can't use that evidence against them, if they find that information out some other way, the officer can still be prosecuted, right? So it's just when you force them to give up their Fifth Amendment right that you can't prosecute based on that information. But there could be other information like a body camera, cop watcher, third-party witness, some other information that that will get them convicted without their compelled statement. So I'm hoping that gives us some hope that we're not short-circuiting criminal investigations while creating the strongest administrative investigations that we could possibly do. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Handelman. Any other comments? Ideas? Thoughts? Staff?
Yeah, just a quick reference that the potential ability of the oversight board to be involved in the renegotiation or bargaining is something that the structural oversight subcommittee will be addressing. That's where that would fall. So just if those members who are interested might want to speak to their colleagues or that one. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Pardon. Commissioner Dan?
Well, as I'm thinking about this, the new board can't be involved in those negotiations if the negotiations are happening to establish the boundaries for how the new board functions. So it might be something we as the commission need to ask if any of us can be involved in those negotiations to ensure that what we're doing is on the table. So that might be something to put in the garden plot or something. I don't know. So just chicken and egg, but really, I think it's pretty clear which comes first in this case. That like with the body cameras, they still haven't instituted the program because they haven't finished negotiating with the PPA, and it's likely that the board won't go into place until the PPA is done negotiating how it's going to work. So something to think about.
Thank you. Commissioner Handelman? There's another question in the Q&A. Co-chair Obi, would you mind reading into the record? We have a question in the Q&A that I think might be good.
Absolutely, thank you. So we have a question sent in at 8:37 and stating, what licenses or certifications will board investigators need to access LEDs, SWIS, BOEC data, traffic, force, fire, etc., CGIs? Probably also want OJD and OSP data as well. What software/hardware will be required to access and make use of these data systems? What intergovernmental agreements will be required to share information between city and county DA, county sheriff, state OJD, OSP, DPSST, LESC, etc.?
Thank you.
So yeah, I think that's a great point, or multiple great points. One of the questions that I had presumed before of what experts can we get to talk to specifically this subcommittee would be someone who help us out with the middle section of that question, or what software/hardware will be required to access and make use of these data systems. I think that is complex, and we're at least looking at two, but most likely many more in regards to what information is transmitted for the function of the city and the function of the police. So I think if we got a little bit more information, we better answer that middle section. I think we all needing the city attorney to help us out with the whole third part of the question, or what intergovernmental agreements. I'm going to be a city attorney, but also I think the city attorney would be best able to help with agreements between the city and the county, or Portland and Multnomah, as well as state agreements as well. So that is a question for later as well. In regards to licensure, I am going to defer that question right now because I am not sure about that first portion.
Thank you, Commissioner Obi. Commissioner Angie?
Thank you. As somebody that's actually accessed a lot of this information, CGIS and BOEC, I don't think it's accessing the information as much as being able to access relatable information. Like we could all get ArcGIS, CGIS type of data, but we wouldn't know what to do with it. So I think that might be something that we do need to consider is, what form of the data we're getting, not which databases we're getting the information from, but what form of that data we are getting that, because, they could dump a whole database on us and we're not going to know what that means. But, with the right interpretation and different software packages, I think that we'd be able to interpret what it said more effectively, obviously. So, and I do appreciate, Obi, you bringing up, us trying to be as efficient as possible with this data. So, yeah, so I think that it definitely is one of the topics that we do need to talk about is what form of data we're getting. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Angie. Co-chair Tirsa?
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment, Angie, and I think that it'd be worth asking IPR already what data they find useful or what data would they wish that they could have had that they do not have access to, and then going from there. To make a determination as to what databases would make sense for the new oversight board to have access to.
Thank you, Co-chair Tirsa. Commissioner Handelman?
Thank you. Yeah, so I think I shared a document with the group at a different time. I'm going to try to find it on my hard drive again, but it's a letter that the auditor wrote as the city council was getting ready to put the ballot measure forward that lists a lot of the state laws and other administrative hurdles that IPR has faced. Because remember, the auditor used to be in charge of IPR until July of this year. So I'll see if I can find that again, upload it. If I can't, I'll circulate it on email later, but I think I have it pretty handy.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Sounds great. So many good suggestions and thoughts. Any others? And maybe give Commissioner Dan a little time and he might be able to pull that up. If everyone is.
This is it. I'm in the chat now.
Thank you, Commissioner. So please feel free to open that up. And I think we'll wrap up this portion of our meeting today and go into the next steps. Staff, did you want to talk about our next steps?
I'll pass it over actually to co-chair Obi. I just wanted to once again mention that the next meeting of this subcommittee is December 12th, which is 2 Mondays from now, if I recall correctly.
Mhm.
And I'll pass it over to Co-Chair Obi.
Perfect.
Thank you. And when looking at next steps, the first thing would be kind of as we mentioned before, since we're meeting every 2 weeks, plus or minus, I'm out drafting some groups to specifically research or get more information on specific tasks. Our three coming into this meeting, I think our three main tasks were access to records, compelling testimony, and subpoena power. I think a fourth task kind of floated into our what we should look at in regards to more of the kind of data aspect of this. I think it goes to these main questions that were just asked now and what we're discussing. I think there's a kind of fourth group would be maybe data, and I would, in that portion, since I mentioned it beforehand, maybe include updating on body camera work, which I think also, yeah, data and body camera footage, I think is a good fourth group. So I think if anyone had any specific, as co-chair of this thing, if anyone had any specific things they would like to kind of break off into a group or a partnership with and do, I would be glad to get any help in people going in separate directions and meeting back with like emails midweek or on the weekend, and then discussing what we found at the next meeting too. So perfect. Okay, it looks like thank you, Angie, with regards to data gathering / body cams, that'd be fantastic. Does anyone else have any specific things that they like or know about that might be helpful?
Tirsa said should work on subpoena power. Commissioner Tirsa.
I'm basically going to wait till everyone is done, and I will do the last thing. That's least appealing. So you guys choose.
Staff.
Yeah, if it's helpful to maybe clarify the ask a little bit, Co-Chair Obi, would it be correct to say that the idea is that there'd be an email thread and within about a week, whoever volunteers for whichever of these 4 categories would be asked to kind of put together a starting point for the subcommittee's discussion in 2 weeks? Exactly.
And like, small tidbits of information, previous looks at different cities that have employed similar systems, links, or PDFs as we're sending out right now. Basic stuff that we can kind of build on for our next meeting, and then hopefully really jump on a third meeting and tear down the fourth one as we prepare the documents in the third and fourth meeting.
So it looks like there's a second volunteer for body cameras, one for subpoena power, and none yet for compelling testimony or access to police records, and which would probably include those certification questions.
Commissioner Dan says I can work on compelling testimonies, and so does Commissioner Seabob, and public record or police records.
Okay, so I think it's just me, and I can. Oh, so everything has one. Because I was thinking I would work on either access to records or compelling testimony, whichever one is more meaty, I guess, since everyone's split up. So yeah, absolutely.
Commissioner Dan also said, but thinks it may be something we need briefing on first. So just gonna put that in the record as well. Commissioner Dan.
Yeah, well, so this was mentioned before, I think, but I really want to emphasize that part of what we're doing, in addition to figuring out how this can be done, under what we see written in the charter, is that we should come up with a plan B, like a workaround in case, given the history of the PPA and what we know they're going to try to do to stop this from going forward, figure out another way to do it so that the board can still function even if certain elements of the charter are challenged. And there's a provision in the charter that we read in the other group that's at the very end that says if any part of it is not workable, the rest of it still stands. But it would be good to figure out a way to make all of it work one way or another.
Are you muted, Commissioner
Oh, yeah.
Angie?
Thank you. I was reading the chat as well. Thank you very much, Victoria.
I just have a question. I guess maybe I'll refer back to Commissioner Rennell, who's not on this commission, but who asked a question about all the data. I'm wondering from the data point of view, is my stepping off point, finding out what data we want to find, like what databases we want to access, because seeing his list of databases and having access databases from a city job previously, I am pretty familiar with how to get to those, but I need to know which databases we want to have access to. So I guess I'm just kind of wondering like what my question is. What my question is my question what databases we want access to, and then we can figure out what data we want from those. Is that what I'm kind of looking for?
Well, I think that's a valid way of approaching it. I also think it would be good to see what we find or what panels like this seem as meaningful to them, and then working from that, or working slightly backwards. Like, what's the meaningful information that they have or would like, and then where those align with the databases that we have access, that we could have access to. And I don't want to send you on like a big wild goose chase of getting all the information and then going from there, and prefer to see what we like and then kind of come from there,
Okay, so so I would be probably getting in touch with one of the other I'm so sorry, with the police review commission or the CRC with those. Is that what it is?
I think that was the suggestion that was brought up before, and I think that's a good one. Possibly looking at what we're doing now. In my mind, I would love to see what another successful city has done, and partially emulate that in our thinking. Like some cities that we had best practices. So looking if they have anything similar too, and if they, of course, if they had it in a nice warm packaged file of what specific information they generally will share with the committee, and then we could compare better compare with what we have here and what we want here.
Thank you. Okay, my lovely commissioners, we have to go to public comment. Oh, let's see here. Oh, I can't read. Sorry, if you get close. Okay. This is different. Sorry. So we'll go to public comment. We ask that people of the public take 2 minutes to ask their questions and to about what basically the commission has been discussing. Yeah, so I guess I'll open it up to see if there is any. I see there's stuff in the Q&A, but anyone that wants to speak. Let's see. Sorry, y'all. I'm not seeing anything. Thank you. Okay, I guess there is nothing. Thank you for that. For the public. There is 2 questions in the Q&A. Oh, there is 1 question in the Q&A. Looks like it was more of a comment. Basically, it's far better to know what you're looking for before you start. Basically, more of a comment, not a question, from one of our commissioners. Okay. Now, yes.
Yeah, just
Thank you. Yeah.
if I could jump in for a moment,
please.
we did kind of, I think, skip over one thing, which is just a quick note, not a discussion item, but just a reminder that Co-Chair Obi has been doing a great job as the sole co-chair of this subcommittee to date. However, there will be a second co-chair, hopefully approved by the full commission, to join Co-Chair Obi for the remainder of the work of this subcommittee. And there'll be more information sent out over email about who, the possibilities are and how to be a candidate there. But that will occur next Thursday, December 8th at the full commission meeting. So just a reminder that, please think about it, and there'll be more info over email there. And I think we can go over to the garden plot recap.
Yes. This is time for facilitators and co-chairs, staff to summarize any items brought up today which didn't fit in today's agenda. We'll do a recap of those items here and use them for developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so these items can be addressed. So first off, Victoria, do you have anything on your
No, I will pass it to staff.
Thank you.
Yes. So first, noting that there will be sort of a subcategory created for within the garden plot of limitations posed by state and federal law that may be helpful for the commission to include as requests for the city council to pursue getting changed, in addition to the proposed city code. There was an item to discuss collective bargaining with a collective bargaining expert on the labor side, as well as there were requests, all the requests are sort of separate, but the collective bargaining was both a request for a briefing and a discussion item. More information on IT and multi-system sharing. Question about the other 3 components of access to information and where they fall into this specific, I shouldn't say components, other 3 potential entities that might need access or receive access to information in the new system. So whereas this subcommittee focuses primarily on the oversight board and agencies to date, access to information, there's also complainant access to information, officer access to information, and public access to information, which need to determine where those sort of live in terms of what phase of work and or which subcommittee. And finally, there was an open question about the potential for involvement in the 2025 collective bargaining agreement negotiations, which is, I think, a pretty complex question for a lot of reasons that's worth exploring a little bit more. And then finally, there was a reference in the Q&A to how, if at all, this overlaps with the sort of city transparency advocate, and just try to get some more information to the commission members about that if it does relate in any way. And definitely accept the correction there from Commissioner Dan. When collective bargaining agreements expire on June 30th of a given year, negotiations often start the year before that in some way for it. And I'm sure when there's an expert on it, they can give more information as to when that would be likely to start, but certainly 2025 or earlier is an appropriate correction there.
Thank you, staff. Any other garden plot items from the co-chairs?
None here for now. Thank you.
And I think you got all the ones that I had. Staff, so. Wonderful. I guess we are in a place where we can adjourn. So as a reminder, I heard, did I hear somebody? Okay, I'm just making sure because I missed Pete's face. So as a reminder, you can now submit advanced public comment in 3 ways to the Police Accountability Commission. As you can see, online web form, voicemail, and postal mail. You can submit online at tinyurl.com/Portland PAC comment, and you can leave a voicemail at 503-823-3346. And you can mail at Portland Police Accountability Commission, or excuse me, Police Accountability Commission, City of Portland, Community Safety Division, PO Box 9065, Portland, Oregon 97207. And we thank all the commission members for their time and energy today. Thank you for the public for being here. And our next meeting will be December 12th. It is now 9 p.m. and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your time.